All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Pensive Politics, Mr. Watson. I'm your host, Christian Watson, and I am very happy to be here with you guys today. Excuse me for the very tardy start. I was trying to get a few graphical things to work. You know, we're still in the test phase of this show. We're still trying to make sure that the new live show format we have here is going to be efficient, but I appreciate all of you for hanging in there with me and for being patient with me. So I hope all you guys are having a great Sunday today. There have been quite a few things that have been happening over the past few days, and as many of you probably have saw in the title, one of the first ones I'm going to talk about today is Nick Fuentes. So I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Nick Fuentes, but for those of you who are not, I will give you, well, first of all, you're a very fortunate person if you're not familiar with Nick Fuentes. Because Nick Fuentes, there's absolutely nothing epistemically rigorous, philosophically deep about him. Everything about him is a microcosm of the mindsets that permeate the contemporary political discourse in the West, particularly. I have no idea about the East's discourse, but I know about the West's discourse, and I understand, at least in the internet arena, people are attuned to hearing soundbite, simplified information, and people like Fuentes absolutely feed that desire. There will be a market for everything, and there will be people who try to sell people in that market the goods that they think they want. Because, my friends, you have to understand, in this world of trying to consume information, trying to consume it fast, trying to be first fast, people don't want to do the epistemically rigorous work of actually considering positions, going through certain arguments in their mind, going through certain ideas in their mind, and seeing if these ideas are true or just. No, people want to be told what they want to hear. And if they're not told what they want to hear, or if someone who has been telling them what they want to hear tells them something different, that person is immediately a pariah in their eyes and their minds. That person's reputation is eviscerated just like that. Which is why when I do this show, I do this channel, I make it very clear. If I say something that you disagree with, challenge me, debate me, call in, talk to me. Don't write me a hate comment or an anonymous comment, because that doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help you. It doesn't help me. It doesn't help the production of knowledge at all. You know, but Fuentes has kind of found a marketplace that he can go and spit his bile with. Fuentes has found a group of people who are angry, and he has used their sensibilities as a means of accruing social capital. Now, the social capital that Fuentes has is not all that grand, because evidently he is banned from almost every single social media platform in existence. He is banned from almost every single Bitcoin platform in existence. He is on the no-fly list. There are just a lot of things that are plaguing him and ailing him. And the question that comes up when it comes to Fuentes, people are saying, well, you know, he is saying bad things, but this sort of mass mob alienation of him, his sort of ability to operate in society, has been impaired by this sort of private tyranny, and therefore, P.F. Jung says, appreciate the desire for challenge, Christian. I think it's appreciated. I appreciate P.F. Jung. And for those of you who do not know who P.F. Jung is, we had a debate about libertarianism a few months ago, and you can go find it on this channel. It's one of my favorite debates. It's really, it was an eye-opening experience for both of us, and I think that I made inroads. But about Fuentes, though, people are saying that this sort of private tyranny that has sort of overtaken Fuentes' journey in life is wrong and needs to be stopped. I think Dinesh D'Souza said, and this is what Fuentes says. He said that Fuentes is now the poster child for the civil liberties movement. Now, Dinesh D'Souza just followed me, so I am nothing against Dinesh D'Souza. We don't agree on everything. We don't see eye to eye on everything. But to phrase Nick Fuentes as a post child for anything other than a reprobate and sort of mind that cannot reach beyond the limitations of his thinking is to put Nick Fuentes on a pedestal that he does not deserve. The guy makes no rational arguments. He just spits bile. He spits vitriol. He spits hatred. Now, we can keep that in mind as we look at how he's been treated. This right here, my friends, is my house. The sound of my voice whether you're watching us on a podcasting platform or YouTube, this is my house. And I have the right to decide what kind of mentalities I let in my house. That's just my right. Because my house is an extension of my genius, my labor. And all of our houses are extensions of our own geniuses and our own labor. Even if you're renting, you are, for a very temporary moment, that the fact that you're renting something means that for a particular moment, you own that space. For a particular time, you own that space. It's an extension of your will. So if we're going to establish this idea of property and recognize it as sacrosanct, then we have to understand something. No matter how I use my house here has absolutely no bearing on the ethical correctness of an proposition. No matter how Twitter or Facebook or YouTube use their houses has a very little bearing on the ethical considerations of an action, provided that they're not using them in a manner that is sort of egregiously harming someone else. So YouTube, obviously, it would be wrong if the producers of YouTube said, you know what, let's go make a video spreading lies about this guy down the street because he hates our platform, and let's get everyone to mob him. Like, yeah, that's wrong. But simply denying you something is not necessarily a moral calamity. When YouTube and Twitter denying Nick Fuentes a part on their platform, they're not necessarily taking anything away from him. They're just refusing to give something to him. They have been actively giving him a platform, and they decided, you know what? We're not going to give you anything anymore. We're not going to interfere. And something we must establish is that none of us have a right to someone else's stuff. None of us have a right to someone else's property. None of us have a right to someone else's interference. So we've gone from the particular, the property, to general, the interference. It's like saying, if I don't provide someone health care, I'm killing them. No. I'm just not providing them something. I mean, now, we can talk about what a nice thing is to do. What is a nice thing to do? Is it nice to provide someone a platform? Depends on the context. Is it nice to provide someone healthcare? Again, depends on the context. I don't want anyone to go without healthcare. I don't want anyone to have to die because they're sick. But just because I don't want anyone to be inconvenienced by that kind of stuff does not mean that it is therefore my obligation to undertake what should be their obligations and their priorities in accruing their own capital. And this is the problem with Fuentes. Too many people are interpreting inconvenience as an ethical malady. Too many people are interpreting inconvenience as an ethical malady. Just because I inconvenience you does not mean I'm harming you. All right, let's read what some of the chats here. Yucatan says, he still has a super large audience. Yes, he does, unfortunately. Social conservative views are what people seek. Well, okay, I would differentiate Fuentes from the average social conservative, by the way. I would just do that, because he's not the average social conservative. He is a nationalist populist who thinks that social conservatism right now is in an inferior state. So I would differentiate him from those people. Hatred is not inherently bad. America needs hate and intolerance. Tolerance is destroying America. You have to justify that claim. I don't see that as the case. I think that's no. First of all, let's stop with these abstractions, okay? When we say that something is destroying America, when we say that, we are treating America not in its proper way. We're treating America as an abstraction in which we presume that everything within that abstraction is interconnected. That's not America, though. America is the sum of all the interactions that each and every one of us complete on a day-to-day basis. America is not this big abstract organism. America is me when I go off to the store and go talk to the store clerk. America is you when you go off. America is the continued result, the continued process of an action. So let's not talk about America as if it's this sort of broad entity that we can prescribe certain things for, that we believe, we deduce will have a positive effect. It's not the case. It doesn't follow from reason. Nick is a clown, but that's a terrible argument. What's the bad argument, Tankies? Libertarians are insane. Denying someone's healthcare could be the look. I am not saying that I, as a person, if I did not have the capacity to give someone health care, which is an action, by the way, it's not someone already has an obligation or a claim to. If I were in a position to give someone health care and I could help them, I would help them. But this is a matter of ethical and moral obligations. This is not a matter, my friend, of you having a right to someone else's action. I don't know what channel Trump Live is, West. He's a paleoconservative. Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I have problems with paleoconservatives, you know? I don't hate them. Like I don't hate any human being, you know? I love everyone. But I think I have problems with them conceptually. Stranger says, Christian, you are too individualistic. Well, I get that a lot. But you articulate your position well. Well, thank you, Stranger. I appreciate it, man. Thank you. So the problem with me with Fuentes is the idea of translating an inconvenience into an ethical wrong, because that presumes that you have a right to certain things. Now, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube are the dominant mediums for communication right now. They are, absolutely. And it certainly would inconvenience someone who wants to have a career in ideas and media if they're banned from those platforms. And so there are, and those inconveniences are real. It's why I am backed up on Odyssey, my friends. I don't have the stars in my eyes. I'm not bowing and kneeling before YouTube or Facebook. I understand that the risk for people who have alternative viewpoints to be taken down is very, very serious. But I also understand that regardless of any inconvenience to me, I have no right to the services of anyone. None. Zero. And that principle must remain constant if we are to obtain or preserve a sense of justice in our transactions. Now, I don't want Fuentes banned. In all honesty, I think Fuentes provides a perspective that is important for people to understand. I think Fuentes actually is a very good argument for the continued viability of free expression in our discourse. I don't want him banned. I don't want him banned. But I want people to understand that inconveniences do not translate necessarily to moral and ethical wrongs. Tanky's bot says, is it just an inconvenience when there are no alternative platforms? But there are. There are plenty of alternative platforms. But the problem is they don't have the force or the power that YouTube, Google, and Facebook do. And they don't have the talent that YouTube, Google, or Facebook do. With very few exceptions. I mean, Odyssey is okay. Their layout can be better, in my opinion. And I love Odyssey. It's fine. They're okay. Parler is fine, but they don't have the technological proficiency to keep up. But they have been offloaded several times, so I won't give Parler 2 out over time. But Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter are simply the result of people's desires to go there. They're not these grand mind-controlling wizards who have the ability to compel people to go ahead and join them. They're people who provide a service, and people tend to eat up the service. Even when people go to other services like Parler, they still use Twitter as a base of operations. So yes, it is an inconvenience. It's not a good inconvenience, but I'm trying to reach a point where we can understand the moral or ethical viability of a claim against an inconvenience, and there is none from what I can see. West asks, Are you with Trump? So there were some things that President Trump did that I agree with, and there were other things I don't agree with. I think I have no allegiances to any man. I have no allegiances to any person, any woman, anyone. I have allegiances with ideas, and human beings are vessels for ideas. And so there were some ideas, again, that Trump did quite well. The bent on non-interventionism was great, in my opinion. The United States should not be patrolling the world and whipping the world's problems down. The United States should not be spending trillions upon trillions of dollars trying to fight concepts and ideas and metaphors. So I think that was fine. I think that his move to reduce the amount of reduce the regulatory burden that is pushed upon the American public by and through the bureaucratic state, it was great. He tried to do that. He tried to do that very succinctly. So there are some things I like about him, and then there are other things I think are just bad. I think, but you know what? He's not what we're talking about today. It's like everyone else. No, so that hope that answers your question. But so the reason I even bring Fuentes up, because number one, he was trending the other day. Number two, Fuentes just appeared at CPAC. Oh yes, Fuentes just appeared at CPAC. Now, I want to see if I'm going to be able to pull up the Twitter thread, which contain an exhibition of his appearance there, because Fuentes, first of all, he appeared at CPAC in a very belligerent manner. Fuentes did not go to CPAC in good faith. What do I mean by this? What I mean is, when he, and excuse me, my computer's having a few issues right now loading some stuff, but it'll come up eventually. Nightville says there are other platforms: Odyssey, BitChute, Rumble. Nick even it's right. That's right. That's right. Exactly. And Nick can still stream from the America First website too. So he can still get out there, just not in the mainstream. West says, I am a coward fence sitter. I'm not a fence sitter. I'm actually pretty resolute in my ethical judgments. I don't believe in the idea of the mean or balance. I believe what is right, and what is correct, what is wrong, and we shouldn't have to sacrifice what is wrong for what is right in the name of balance. That's what I believe. So there is no fence sitting with me. None at all. But anyway, so the video won't be coming up anytime soon. Excuse me. But there was a video where Nick and a crowd of Nick's supporters were outside of the CPAC hotel, and they were just screaming America First. They were screaming Groyper. They went inside the hotel and proceeded to scream in the face of a Slate journalist. And it really is, in my opinion, reminiscent of people who have an inability of thinking for themselves. When our political discourse becomes connected to personalities, which ignores a sort of intangibility of ideas, and the intangibility of ideas is manifested through what people do, then we really ignore the root of political causes. A lot of the ideas that we talk about in the American experiment today are not ideas that are brought about by people, but they're ideas that we can actually observe in nature. When we say that human beings are free, I don't need someone to tell me that. I can observe that. Now, I may need some language or some identifiers to be able to define that precisely, but I don't need someone necessarily to tell me that human beings are free. I know I'm free. I know. By my actions, by my ability to think, I know I'm free. When someone's getting shot in the ghettos in the inner city of Chicago, I don't need someone to tell me that's a bad thing. I know it's bad. I may need some language or some words to be able to back that idea up a little bit, but I know it's bad. But when you follow a personality and you praise a personality and you sanctify a personality like Fuentes, you are completely forgetting about the intangibility of ideas, and you are appending your destiny, your hope, if you sanctify him, to him. So when one's destiny and one's hope is appended to a particular person, what happens? Any attack against that particular person becomes an attack against your destiny, your will, your life. This is how cults get started. This is why Jim Jones was such a powerful person. Because so many people didn't realize that they had the power contained within themselves to move their lives towards a better end. So they trusted Jim Jones, who had the answer, apparently. And what happened? Well, they ended up dying because he led them to their slaughter. Now, I'm not saying all sanctifications of personalities lead to death, not all of them. But I am saying that all of them misplace ideas. All of them misplace the proper station of ideas. That's my thoughts, at least. TechieSpot says, those grapers at CPAC were very cringe. They looked very so. Okay, we don't use Techie. We don't use those kind of words on the Pensive Politics show. So I appreciate your opinion, but I don't use those kind of words. Right? Yeah. I don't use those kind of words. And I think that a part of my aversion to the words cringe and soy has to do with the fact that, again, it's emphasizing the importance of personalities and people, and not the importance of abstract concepts which may act through those people. It's not really looking at what should really be looking at. It's a distraction, those kind of words. And they just perpetuate a culture, a vile culture of political hatred that does not also prevents us from being able to see what we're really trying to see. If all you see is hatred, if all you see is disdain for your opponents, you may not be able to see their ideas. When I say stay pensive, I mean engage critically with ideas that you may not want to engage with at all. The one voice says, I think if you follow too much, you become a mouthpiece for said individual. Yes, exactly. Precisely. Which is why I don't want any of you to become a servant or a groveler before Christian Watson. I want all of you to take my words, rip them apart, think for yourself, and use my words to hopefully get some new revelations. But these are my words. They're not, but it's not my person. Don't use my person. Don't use my being. Don't use my soul. Don't use my appearance. Don't use anything to sanctify myself over you. You're the one who matters. You're the one who's going to be doing this stuff. And so, springboarding off of Fuentes, it's the broader idea of freedom of expression. Now, expression, my friends, no, don't do that. That's not good. But the one voice said, but Christian Watson said, no, that's not good. Expression, my friends, is simply the mind's it is the mind's intelligible. It's the mind's attempt to make the will intelligible. It's the mind's attempt to make the will intelligible. What do I mean by this? When I express myself, I have many ways of doing that, all of which are tied to my state of mind. If I have a certain expression on my face, that expression on my face is most likely tied to what I'm thinking. When I let words fall from my mouth, those words are most likely tied to what I'm thinking. So expression is a natural faculty of the human being because it is connected with the mind. It's connected with my brain. It's connected with this faculty here by which all of my thoughts go through. Now, There are people whose thoughts don't necessarily go through the entirety of their brain. They just go in and they go out without any consideration. And that's bad. Too much. Our politics is too much of that these days. But the mind is a natural, expression is a natural faculty of the mind. So when we say we support free expression, what I mean is, or what I think people who follow the definition might mean, we support the mind being able to express itself without any undue inhibitions. Now, no one can take away your free expression. They can try to block it, they can try to inhibit it, but no one can really take away your natural faculty of expressing and actualizing your will unless they kill you. It's like no one can take away your ability to breathe unless they kill you. They can try to stop it. They can try to make it harder. But these are things that are ingrained in you. So when the folks say, if we understand the natural faculty definition of freedom of expression, it is illogical to say that Fuentes' freedom of expression has been taken away. Of course, it's in certain areas. All that's happened is that certain platforms have denied his ability to exercise his free expression through their medium. But there are plenty of other platforms and mediums by which Fuentes can exercise his faculties. He just had a press conference the other day, which has been picked up on those same networks, on those same social media networks that have banned him. Once again, inconvenience is not a moral wrong. It's not a moral wrong. We're at 30 minutes, my friends. I'm going to take a quick break really quickly. In the next 29 minutes, we have my mentor, my friend, Bryan Hyde coming up. So in the next 29 minutes. So stay with me, guys. I love you guys so much. And please stick around. I will be back in a few seconds. All right, I am back. Welcome back to me. So, back onto the expression thing. A lot of and this is what I've noticed about a lot of these nationalist ideologies. A lot of them tie the human being's destiny and physiology to the perpetuation of some kind of identity or some kind of whatever, right? Like the immigration debate. A lot of nationalists will say, well, if those people from that country come in, they'll change our culture. And there'll be a different kind of appearance to our culture and our heritage, and it'll go away. And you're tying the destiny of the human being to an image that may or may not be what you're saying it is. I have no verification that someone who looks differently or thinks differently will then use those different views or those different looks to force their paradigm upon me. I have no indication, because that would simply be a ad hominem fallacy. No logical person has in any indication that, unless there's exact evidence of that. But what the identitarian will do, they'll take the image of that person and they'll transpose it against your fate without actually proving that your fate is at risk. It's a sort of circular argument almost that is not really argued at all. And this is what Fuentes does. Fuentes takes the idea of America, takes the idea of white folks, takes the idea of conservatism, poses it against certain individuals and certain images of individuals, and then draws a conclusion that that idea is going to lead to a certain fate for you. But this is not logically follow. But it's powerful, though, because human beings, as the social animals that we are, this is a statement first made by Aristotle, and it has been continued throughout many philosophical and intellectual traditions. Human beings, being the social animals that we are, a lot of us want to feel connected to something higher. A lot of us want to feel connected to something grander or bigger. A lot of us are bound almost by these abstract ideas because they reach the pathos at the center of our heart. But the human mind is not a one-dimensional entity. The human mind requires a logos too, requires a powerful logos. And that lack of logos in these ideas is what is allowing people to be led astray. That lack of logos is what is allowing entire classes of people to be considered as classes and not individuals. That lack of logos is what is allowing identity to be put on this pedestal. That lack of logos and that over-sanctification of pathos. That is one of the bigger killers in American culture right now. Pathos is a place, a very important place, but it is not the supreme entity by which we must make our decisions. I'm not saying rationalize and think all day. That's not good either. There are so many folks who rationalize and think all day that their rationalizations and their thinking leads them away from practical reality. No, you must stay rooted in practical reality, and emotions are a part of practical reality. But you should not try to impose your own interpretations upon phenomena that do not fit with your interpretations. There is an objective way of seeing this world. But the nationalist and the person who exalts identity as the core function or the core value of the human being are people who obviously can't leave natural phenomena in their place, in their assigned place. And Fuentes is one of those people. Just my thoughts. Tankies asks, how would you respond to the argument that these platforms are not politically neutral and this has negative consequences? So first of all, the negative consequences do not say anything to me about the viability of the moral principle. A moral action can have bad consequences for certain people. It's a moral action, if we're going to have a stable understanding of morality, is not going to be predicated upon a consequence. And this is a sort of utilitarian idea that, if the consequences are bad to a lot of people, it must be a bad thing. No, not necessarily. Utilitarianism can be used as a means of justifying pretty despicable things because it is utterly subjective and utterly contingent on certain conditions and not on grand moral truths. It's a way at saying to reality, you know what? I see you, reality, but I'm not going to actually adhere to what is in reality. I'm going to bend it to the woes. I'm going to bend it to the will of society, of social appetites. Social appetites are not stable moral propositions, though, because they change so often. They're so fickle. So I don't care if it has negative consequences, so long as those negative consequences don't violate my rights. Now, as for this politically neutral thing, when we say the word political, we're talking about the government. Very few entities in this country are politically neutral. Many business entities either get some sort of tax credit or subsidy or whatever. So the argument, first of all, tech companies have no obligation to be politically neutral. They have no obligation to be politically neutral. None. Maybe under civil law they do, but under natural law they do not. No one has an obligation to formulate their property in a particular way as it relates to the government. Because that's what politically neutral would imply. That the platform is not necessarily concerned with taking a political position. They're concerned with not taking one. There's no obligation for that. So I don't think it matters that if they're not politically neutral. Now, whether they are or not is up for debate. I think that Facebook and Twitter and YouTube have targeted both the left and the right. I mean, Right Wing Watch the other day was just taken down, and a lot of people on the left were saying, well, why the people that Right Wing Watch talk about were not taken down? What's happening there? And there was a big uproar and stuff, and boom, it got back up. Steven Crowder has had some problems, and once there was an uproar about that, he got back up. So, race is just a proxy. The fact that it is the children of immigrants, right? I guess, yeah. Race is just a fact. Come on. No, well, again, we're seeing America here, Yucatan. And just for the folks who are listening over the podcast, Yucatan said, race is just a proxy. It's the fact that it correlates with culture. Children of immigrants retain their parents' culture, and when millions come on, integration becomes difficult, and America changes. What does that mean? What do you mean America changes? First of all, I want to make one thing clear. Many children sociologically deviate from their parents' beliefs. In fact, this is a natural feature of adolescence, a deviation from what people are being told. Many Gen Zers and people who are much younger are deviating from people 50 years ago who may be their parents right now. The mindsets of a lot of people 50 years ago are not the mindsets of right now. To suggest that someone's cultural identity is bound to their physiological identity, and that is a means by which we can understand them, is to bind the human being to a sort of deterministic fixedness, a rigidness that goes against our dynamic nature. Human beings are dynamic creatures. Our minds, our ideologies, the development thereof are dynamic things. So no, I heartily reject the idea that I can discern what someone's ideas and values will be on the basis of how they look. And I reject the idea that because someone came from someone else who holds certain values, they will automatically hold the same values. That is a ahistorical and logically unrigorous, logically false claim. I reject both of those ideas. No, I don't believe it. Also, America is not this grand organism. America is not this grand idea that can be measured and prodded towards certain things. I don't believe that, because that doesn't exist. If this is the case, if America really is this grand collective idea that we can understand through certain things, and not the sum of individual interactions, which must be understood in terms of localities and particularities, then I challenge a few things. Number one, let's have a single representative for the entire country. Let's have a single representative for the entire country. A single one. Let's have a single governor for the entire country. What would happen is, and this is what the colonies had the same thing. The colonies had a single king. But even the colonies had administrators of particular parts of the colonies. Even they had governors and stuff. Why? Because it's hard to account for the desires of every single person just because they have the moniker American under their name. It's hard to, because human beings are complex, diverse creatures. The Quakers, the Pilgrims, and the Puritans, all three white groups, hate each other because of the complexities and the nuances of their different approaches towards many things, towards Native Americans, towards integration, towards everything, towards war and violence. Human beings contain multitudes. Human beings contain multitudes. We are not the sum of our parts. We are not the sum of our identities. We are not the product of these things. We are the products of actions, of deliberative contemplation. Life is so more complex than can be reduced to labels and terms. Does this mean that labels and terms are useless? No. But it does mean that they are not all-encompassing. So no, I don't believe I can discern someone's viewpoints because of how they look. No. Nope, don't believe that. No, sir. And by the way, I'm not trying to be aggressive or mean. This is just how I speak. So excuse me if I come off as that. Okay, who else? Wasn't a consequential argument. It seemed like one. Astra asks, why is it difficult to outcompete monopolistic social media platforms? Because a lot of people like them and give them their time and their approbation. When I was 7 or 6 years old, MySpace was hot. Facebook was something that you didn't even use. And all the celebrities were on MySpace. All of them were. Then a few years later, Facebook cracked the code and MySpace became nothing. That's just one example. When I was a kid, Blockbuster was hot. Then Redbox came along. The convenience and the ease sunk Blockbuster. Now Netflix comes along. The convenience and the ease has kind of sunk Redbox, although Redbox survives in rural areas because most people don't have internet in rural areas. The dynamism of human interactions, the dynamism of human development. That's what matters. That's what I can account for, my friends. That's what matters. Yeah, I think intellectual property is nonsense. Countercollective says tech companies that powerful because tech patents that need to be reformed. Yeah, intellectual property is nonsense. There is a sort of collusion between the government and tech companies to keep them in power. I agree with that. But the solution is not more government. The solution is not use reform into Section 230 to sink the tendrils of the state into this area. No, the solution is pull back. Pull back. That's the solution. That's the solution, in my opinion. And there are some of you I'm not going to be able to get to, excuse me, because I got to see this monologue. In 10 minutes, we have Bryan Hyde coming on, by the way, guys. Bryan Hyde is a mentor. He is a friend. He is a radio show host out of Utah. This show also airs on his network, the Federal Ravens Network. And he is an all-around great guy. So when we've established that there are these sort of mythologies about the human being, the sort of mythologies that tie them to this sort of rigid idea of what an American is, tie them to this sort of rigid idea of what culture is, and don't account for the multitude of other factors such as the fickleness of human taste, the sort of development of human thought, the sort of complexity of the human being beyond the exterior. When you have all these falsehoods and mythologies wrapped up in an ideology that appeal to our sensibilities, we may not be able to recognize them as falsehoods or mythologies because politics, my friends, is largely an emotional game. A lot of Fuentes' complaints, and a lot of people's complaints in general, can be fixed. Pertaining to free expression can be fixed by simply acknowledging the divine power that you have within you to impact change. Or not even an impact change, to express, to exercise your freedom. So many of us put our freedom in the hands of the government, of tech companies, of followers. Everyone but ourselves. How in the world is this a correct mindset when we have all the keys contained in the seat of our heart? And this is reflective of what's happening at CPAC right now. So other than the Fuentes thing, CPAC right now is just laden with people, and this is happening over in Texas. I don't know which city, over in Texas, and it's today. And there have been some fine sessions so far at CPAC. Their agenda has included people like Ben Carson, and that's fine. It's okay. But a lot of the sessions are antagonistic. How to beat the left at their own game. How to beat woke people. It's all antagonistic. And all that implies that there's a sort of destiny, this sort of thing unlocked when we beat someone. But what about cooperation? What about cooperation? The One Voice asked, what does CPAC stand for? That's the Conservative Political Action Committee. It is a thing in America where a lot of the conservative people go in one place and they talk and they have conferences and shut and all that kind of stuff. But the question becomes, what about cooperation? Look, I spend my day in this culture war stuff trying to beat certain ideas, but I never try to beat a particular person. If I go into political organization and action with the mentality that I'm going to beat someone, I have excised the possibility of collaboration, progress, and common understanding. All things which were necessary for the establishment, the planting of the seed, which germinated into the granular tree, the forest of the American experiment. All things which are responsible for the production of civilization. I am denying these fundamental principles just to own someone. The sort of colloquial term for this is the owning the libs, right? That's what it's called. That's what it's called. A sort of rejection of fundamental principles for temporary temporal pursuits, for vain temporal pursuits. The owning the libs. But again, I'm not held to account on the basis of conflict. If we were focused on destroying each other, human existence would not be possible. Never. But 123 says the woke advocates and teachers should always have to define their terms. Perhaps. I agree with you. Anyone should define their terms. I'm not saying don't engage in intellectual conflict with people. I'm saying don't see people solely in the light of that conflict. That's what I'm saying. My ideological opponents are not my mortal enemies. Mark Lamont Hill. I disagree with Mark Lamont Hill on almost everything. But I still see him as a brother in humanity. Vosh. I disagree with Vosh about almost everything, too. And I think he has some very dishonest tactics. But I still see Vosh as a human being. I still see Vosh as someone that I could reach and talk to. And even if I couldn't, I still respect him as a human being. I don't typecast him in a singular way, which denies the fullness of his humanity. Yet, this is something that is done by a lot of people these days. It's unfortunate. So the Fuentes thing, my friends, can be disrupted. The sort of what brought Fuentes to rise, the sort of rage, the sort of collective understanding of the human being, all this stuff, the rejection of logos, can all be thwarted if we decide to individually engage in better practices. Politics is a spiritual practice because it is the reflection and the result of particular desires and things which are not immediately apprehendable by the senses. So if we engage in a sort of spiritual practice of understanding things in a very deeper way, in a very complex way, which will require us to sacrifice some things. It's going to require us to sacrifice the skimming a headline for 15 seconds and coming up with a conclusion. It's going to require us to sacrifice the sound bites that we use to understand and appraise certain activities like owning people. It's going to require a sacrifice on your part. Because so many of us are caked and bogged down in the current epistemic structures which influence and invigorate our discourse. But all of you can stop all of that. You all have the power to stop all of that. But that rests within you. All of that rests within you. No one else, not even I, can lead you to a more honest and a more spiritual political disposition. No one but you. No one but you. You have the power to manifest your own destiny. You have the power to see political issues for their depth. You have the power to understand the divinity and the descriptiveness of human beings and deduce from that descriptiveness and that divinity certain things such as our rights and our faculties. You have the ability to change this system. You have the ability to prevent folks who profit off of rage and anger from rising and capturing the minds of the public. You have the ability to do it. You cannot control what other people do, but you can control what you put into the earth. If you spend your time putting spoiled seeds into the ground, don't be surprised if they never bear fruit. If you spend your time outsourcing justification for your faculties into the actions of other people, if you spend the time whining about how your freedom is being taken away when you still have your freedom intact and you can still use it in tangible ways to push back against certain things, don't be surprised when your freedom actually is being assaulted by very real and tangible evils. When you spend your time looking so much at other people that you ignore who you are, don't be surprised if one day you wake up and you're in a battle and you're armorless and you're struck down immediately. Don't be surprised. These are all preventable things. These are all preventable outcomes. But you must be the one to activate them. All right, guys. Bryan Hyde coming up in 2 minutes. Thank you guys for being here so much. I love you. I'll be back in 2 minutes. All right, everyone. So let me introduce our guest for you. So, Bryan Hyde has been someone who has been indispensable to my career. I really admire this man. He helped me out. I remember a year ago when I was kind of just a wandering podcaster and I didn't really know what I was doing. Bryan Hyde came along and he gave me a place where the show still lives today called the Fed by Ravens Radio Network. And, I think that everyone needs to hear the clarity of his voice. Everyone should know exactly how to approach issues like he does, because he does it in such a way that is graceful and kind, and it's infused as well with liberty, which also helps. So, my friends, without further ado, I give you, hold on, let me get the overlays here. I give you Bryan Hyde. Hello, sir.
How are you?
I'm great. I am great. Hold on. Let me get my overlay. Hold on. And let me get my overlay correct. This technology is very different, but there we go. Hello. How are you doing, sir?
Fantastic. I heard you talking about, I can't wait till you hear the clarity of his voice. And I'm thinking, what a great time to get something done. I drink of water. Yeah, this is me.
Well, look, first of all, Bryan, thank you so much for coming on. And again, I just thought it would be only appropriate to tell people again how much you have meant to my journey and the show. But before we get into anything deep, just tell people who you are, tell people about the Fed by Ravens Network, and tell people what your mission is as a sort of commentator and a radio host in today's very divided world.
Yeah, I built myself as a trusted voice of truth and light, which sounds like that's a pretty high bar to set. But it's more about the way that I go about what I do. I've been a radio host for 36 years. I have run the gamut of being a red meat throwing, getting people riled up kind of personality. And then I came to the realization that as good as I was at getting people riled, I felt like there was something more that needed to be done in terms of just helping promote independent thought, helping people question the narratives out there, because I'm sure you see it. You talk about this on your program often. There's a huge disconnect between reality and, what we're supposed to believe, or at least what we're being told to believe. So, people ask me, describe what you do without telling me what you do. I tell them, I brainwash people into thinking for themselves. And if the day comes that they outgrow me, that's what I consider success, because they're now on their own and they're doing their own thing, as opposed to looking to me as some kind of thought leader. Does that make sense?
Yes, I was just talking about this before you came on. I was talking about how so many people, the problem with so many people in today's politics is that they sanctify individuals, they sanctify personalities, and they forget the ideas in the midst of that sanctification that the personalities are actually giving to them. There's this lad, not sure if you've heard of him, called Nick Fuentes. He just got banned from Twitter. Yeah, and I think one of Fuentes' issues is that people are following him as if he is sort of some sort of religious leader, and not recognizing that there are indeed ideas that predate him, that predate anyone who he's cited, and that need to be considered on their own. And that's one of the biggest things that I have been trying to avoid in my fledgling career. I don't want people to worship me or praise me. I want them to get these ideas in their mind. I want that to permeate in their mind, and I want them to go ahead and make their own conclusions. Yet there is such a sort of disposition, a magnetic disposition for people who want to be told what to think by a particular person. Why do you think, and this may be a very big question, because I don't even know, why do you think this is, especially as it relates to talk radio and that kind of world of commentary?
We love our gurus. And I'm not the first person to make this observation. In fact, I'll give credit to a writer by the name of Paul Rosenberg, who first introduced me to the idea that for some reason, we want to seek out somebody we can put on a pedestal and, hey, that's who we'll take our cues from. Which, if there's a good influence and a good example in your life, there's nothing wrong with looking to that person as a source of encouragement or strength or inspiration, to do better or to hit a certain level. But we sometimes forget that the gurus themselves are human. They are fallible. They will make mistakes. In fact, truth be told, a lot of people who attain guru status that are really up there, sometimes they feel like they get a pass. whether it's substance abuse or something like that, or maybe they have a wandering eye and they're out there playing the field, and thinking I can do this with impunity because hey, look at me, I'm important enough. Maybe my press releases are legit, and therefore I'm entitled to this kind of stuff. So Paul Rosenberg's counsel was, we've got to get over our gurus, and that doesn't mean you stop looking for good examples of excellence in human beings. It simply means you focus more on what it takes to be a good person yourself, rather than deriving that sense of purpose strictly from someone else, which, as you were describing, I don't know anything about Nick Fuentes other than I've seen him trending on Twitter. But it's pretty clear the guy has kind of a cult following, and the people who are following him and chanting with him as they're walking through CPAC, yeah, they're with him. But I wonder if you just ask him as an individual, why do you follow this guy? I'd be curious to see what kind of answer they could give. Would it be coherent? I don't know, but I kind of have my doubts based on the chanting, based on the behavior, and that sense of, wait, look who we're with, as opposed to standing on their own 2 feet.
Yes, exactly. And I think that idea about the gurus is very interesting, because a guru is basically a wise man, someone whose knowledge is supposed to be exalted or understand above your own knowledge. And I think that human beings, as a matter of our existence, are naturally situated in a context where there are people whose knowledge transcends our own knowledge. I know that I'm just 21. I got plenty to learn. All of us have plenty to learn. There's always going to be someone, regardless of what age of life I reach, who's going to transcend my own knowledge in whatever condition that I'm in. But the problem is taking that natural fact that people know more than you, and taking that to mean they can give more value to your thoughts, that they mean more than you. That is the fact of knowledge and people knowing more than you is taken to be a value judgment about you yourself. And that's dangerous, because that then puts us in this rat race where we're constantly trying to acquire knowledge at a very fast rate, where we're sacrificing depth for efficiency. And I think that's precisely what is happening with the digital age today. And tell me if you agree or not. I think that a lot of people are looking at headlines and drawing conclusions rather than reading the story. They are looking at tweets instead of actually going in and thinking deeply about things. And they're doing so because they want to be the first. They want to win this race, this sort of gauntlet of knowledge. They're taking a fact, manipulating it into social capital. And that's the dangerous part for me. We should understand, yes, there will always be people who know more than you, but that does not mean that they mean more than you. And that does not mean that in your current condition, you cannot give value to other people. What do you think about all that?
I agree. And I think it's a quest for status that drives that need to be, look, I broke this story. That makes me, a mover and shaker, or whatever it is that motivates people. When we use status as the basis for what we do, whether it's the knowledge we're acquiring or the influence we're trying to wield, we're making an unfair comparison at some level. Status is very toxic. You're either comparing yourself to other people to remind yourself, oh, hey, I really am better than them. It doesn't get much better than me. Or worse, we're comparing ourselves to other people and saying, oh, look at them. They're so much better. They're so much smarter. I could never be that. And so we put ourselves down. And yet most of the world runs on status right now. You look at, well, who are we supposed to listen to? 9 times out of 10, when you ask people that question, they're going to look for who's the most famous, who has the most recognition, the greatest credentials, the greatest net worth. These are just indicators of status, but none of those things in and of themselves indicate that this person actually has the right answer to the question that we're asking. So it comes down to us to improve ourselves the best we can. Not seeking status is probably the first and biggest step in really improving yourself. But to beware, when you start putting people on a pedestal, number one, you're going to be disappointed because they won't stay there forever. But you're also putting your trust in something other than your own ability to reason and to learn.
Well, Bryan, when you say that we should stop really trying to seek status. Now, what if there are certain people who exist in certain career fields where their status is tied to their livelihood? I think that social concepts, when they are divorced from our immediate benefit, are easier to resist than something that could mean you not getting food on the table that night. And I think a lot of people are incapable of seeing beyond that quote unquote pragmatic idea that, you have to do what you have to do to get by. And they sacrifice principles because they feel as if they don't do this thing, they will not survive, right? So I just, there are certain careers where that's a necessity, right? And for example, in the corporate world, a lot in the corporate world, getting status means not only your paycheck, but your reputation, how people perceive you, longevity of that career, and that can mean all kind of other considerations. So I guess my question is, how do we resist the urge to get status when so many of our institutions are inherently concerned with cultivating environments that require status?
I think that kind of answers the question, though, doesn't it? Look at the institutions that run on status. Yeah. Politicians are probably the best example that I can use of people who attain status that they don't really deserve. Case in point, a politician will pass some measure of legislation, or they'll enact some law or something that diminishes your liberty, or that takes from you your prosperity, or otherwise exerts influence and control in the form of state violence over you. And maybe it doesn't even bring benefit to you, but oh look, you helped with this, and a politician will pass that, and the next time they see you, they're at a campaign rally or something like that, they will fully feel entitled that you should be coming up there and oohing and awing, wanting to touch the hem of their garment or shake their hand and congratulate them for all the work that they're doing, the money they brought home, to the district or whatever. I'm sorry, I sound a little bit cynical about politicians, but it's because they want that sense of, look at what I'm doing for you. But right. If I look at what they're doing up against a matrix of is it making me more free? Is it making me more prosperous? Is it getting government out of areas of my life where it doesn't belong? The answer is no. They're putting a boot on my neck and saying, doesn't that feel great? Those are Alan Edmonds I'm stepping on you with. You should compliment me on my great choice in shoes.
Yes. You described it perfectly. Speaking of putting the boot on our neck and freedom, I earlier in the show I was talking about free expression, because there are a lot of folks who are saying that Fuentes being banned was an example of freedom of expression coming under assault. My argument is that freedom of expression itself is a natural capability of the human being, which stands independent of institutions, and that someone who decides to deny you a platform is not necessarily destroying your ability to express yourself. They may just be limiting the reach that you get. But there's no obligation for someone not to inconvenience you. There's only an obligation for someone to respect your rights. That's my position. Now, of course, I understand this is a position that may not be advantageous for me. If I were to get banned from YouTube or Twitter or Facebook or all of them, it would be very hard for me to do what I do. It'd be very difficult, because these days, a career in media requires you to be on one of these platforms, or all of these platforms. But for me, it's a matter of eternal principles. Now, I'm not sure, how do you view the entire big tech censorship thing? Do you think that expression can indeed be attacked by big tech companies, or is it just a matter of inconvenience?
There does seem to be some pretty interesting collusion between the big tech giants in terms of how they are trying to influence the information that's available to their users. And on the one hand, the libertarian in me is like, well, it's a private platform, so it's their sandbox. They get to make the rules. On the other hand, and I liken this mostly to the way that COVID-19, the narrative has been very strictly enforced by these big tech giants. They're doing the bidding of government. They're partnering with government at some level. And I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. To me, that seems to alter the relationship of, is this really private property, or is this a quasi government private partnership? They seem to be in bed at some level with government, and so I wonder if that changes the dynamic. Having said that, censorship, I think, is always a bad idea, even when it's my Republican friends who are trying to get critical race theory banned from being taught in this school or that school. I go back to John Milton and Areopagitica, where he's pleading with the King of England. Don't restrict our ability to share ideas. Don't limit that grappling between truth and falsehood. He says, let them grapple. I'm confident the truth is going to come out, but for that to happen, you've got to have more free speech, not less free speech. So, I hope that there are people who are working on alternatives. What was the Parler? We saw the
Yeah,
Parler
Parlor.
platform
Yeah.
take off like a rocket, and then ostensibly due to the events of January 6th, suddenly it was shut down, and it was surprising how quickly the rug could be yanked out from under it. But as long as there's competition, as long as there's the ability to enter the marketplace, whether it's with a new platform or a better platform or just a better message, free speech is still alive, but sometimes people have to be looking for it in order to find it. And I kind of resigned
Interesting.
myself to the point that I don't think anything I do is ever going to be really good, well suited for mass production or mass consumption. It's going to be for people who are actively looking for it. And that brings me more peace of mind when I realize that I don't need the biggest audience possible. I just need to make sure that what I'm giving the audience that I do have is 100% my best. And to the best of my ability, I'm speaking truth as I understand it.
Wow, that is such a grand reassurance to have. And I think because the rat race kind of escapes you. You're not involved in it. And there are things that I have done in the past that have been products of me trying to get ahead in the rat race. Because there have been folks who've done those things as well, and they've gotten ahead. And so part of me in the past was like, you know what, Christian, you should identify yourself this way or act this way, and maybe this will get you followers. But eventually I realized something. I realized, look, Christian, not everyone is going to like the philosophy. Not everyone is going to connect with you, but everyone does not have to connect with you. You have to connect with the right people. And so I realized that, and that's when I began really to turn up my philosophy. I began to really begin talking in ways that most pundits don't really talk, because I wasn't afraid anymore. I think that the fear of, again, not having that kind of status grapples so many people and holds them down to a station of mediocrity. And I think once we shed that fear, I think more people I think a lot of people, by the way, think like this. They just don't want to say it. I think more people will be willing to come out of the woodwork and actually say it. Now, I must ask you, though, so much of today's media environment seems to be driven by outrage. Why do you think this is? And in your over 30 years in radio, has this changed at all? Has this always been the case?
I think the reason that they're doing it is because it works. That's plain and simple. Fear, anger, hatred, they will cause people to click on a story or on a link. And so outrage is a very powerful driver. And I think it's always been that way. I think this is playing to human nature. I don't want to sound like, I'm not going to tread on the memory of Rush Limbaugh. Some people, oh, he was a hateful man. No, some things he said people took to be hateful or to be, outrageous. But first and foremost, he was an entertainer. But he was an entertainer who used outrage in a way that he drew a massive audience of people and held it for decades. And that this is not to second guess. Could he have done a better job? That depends. What was his goal? Was it to draw the biggest audience in radio history and charge confiscatory advertising rates? If that was his goal, he succeeded, and undeniably. The question falls to each individual person, you and me and anybody else who has a message to speak, is what am I trying to do? And T.K. Coleman from the Foundation for Economic Education had a brilliant explanation that really brought me a lot of peace, because I've looked at the numbers, before and been, they're not growing fast enough. Where are my numbers? And he said something to the effect of, there are people out there who are not interested in what you have to offer. That's life. And I went, okay, fair enough. That's true. Now he says, on the other hand, there are people out there who desperately are looking for what you have to offer. That's purpose. So when you attach purpose to what you're doing, suddenly the numbers don't matter as much as, are my people finding me? And it's okay if not everybody is my people. And that doesn't mean that the people who aren't my people are, somehow my enemy. That just means that there are people who are waiting for your voice to say something that will resonate with them. And I don't know why. The universe has ordained somehow that Christian has the way of saying things or of putting things or the passion that speaks to their heart, and they'll listen to you, where if I were to say it, it would just, go right past them. Maybe they'd hear it, maybe they wouldn't, but for some reason you can reach them. And I think it's that way for any of us who feel, do I dare say, a calling to speak up
Yes.
and say what needs
Yes.
to be said.
Bryan, I've said this several times, and I'll say it again. If I were not doing this, I have no clue what I'd be doing in my life, because this gives me the most fulfillment. This gives me the most joy. Just the idea of being able to put an idea out there into the air and then have someone respond to it, have someone send me an email, have someone, in the rare occasion, they send me a donation. Just that really blesses my day. And there's just a satisfaction that you get from that you really, in my opinion, you can't really get from any other places. Have you felt the same kind of satisfaction? And if so, how does it manifest?
Oh yeah, I've been doing this for a while, in the sense that it's taken me down some interesting roads that I would not have gone down, had I not thought there's purpose to this. So there's times where I've been willing to sacrifice things, where outwardly it appears that, dude, you're taking a step back or you're losing. But I understood that step was necessary to get me to the next place where I could plant my feet and say, here I stand, and do what I was supposed to do, with greater impact. I'm a big believer. I mean, look, I believe that God is more present in our lives than we give him credit for. And I think when we notice it, it's hard not to notice, him in the small details. And I use that term, when I say some people feel a calling to do what they do. And I have felt it for years. And for me, it came when the time came that I realized I was really good at riling people up, but getting people riled, I didn't feel like that was the best and highest use of my time, my talents, my passions. And so I wanted to do something that actually could be beneficial. And that doesn't mean they had to agree with me. I just wanted to speak the truth in a way that people would stop and say, I hadn't thought of it that way. And maybe, maybe it enlarges their perspective, but it's totally up to them as to whether or not they choose to agree with it. And it brought me such peace of mind in approaching things from this way. I didn't feel like I had to prevail in an argument. I didn't have to win in order to be doing what was the best and highest use of what I believe are God-given gifts. So that's how I've approached it now for 15, probably almost 20 years. And I'm still a work in progress. I've got a long ways to go, but it's really gratifying when people come up to me, sometimes years later, and say, I disagreed with you strongly on this issue, but I can see where you're coming from. Or once in a great while, someone will say, I've changed my thinking, and I believe you were correct on that. And it's like, wow.
There's nothing more special than that.
Yeah, I'm going to send some thanks heavenwards for that. But the idea is, we don't do it for the accolades. It's not about, gee, if I just have enough rewards or awards sitting on my shelf to show that I have done a good job of speaking the truth. I just want to speak the truth in whatever situation I'm in. I want to use my influence as wisely as I can, wherever I happen to be standing, and trust that if there is someone who needs that encouragement, those words will be guided to their ears or to their eyes if they're reading something I've written. And I can offer them some kind of encouragement. And it's not important that I get the credit for it. I don't want them to go out there and have to cite, well, as Bryan Hyde once said, that I'd be very flattered if they did, but it's not necessary. I'm trying to help people by dropping trail markers along the way, the same way that people who came before me dropped trail markers to help me find my way out of the swamp of misinformation and into the light.
Right. Well, I do give you credit for something, though. I give you credit for, and we'll talk about February Evans in a second, for stoking talent to get this kind of message out there, for stoking talent who want to not tell people how to think, but give people a blank canvas that has a certain format that allows them to attune their own thoughts to political situations. And so I told people before the broadcast, you probably saw, Bryan Hyde has helped me a lot in my fledgling career so far. And so if you want, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you want to talk about how you found me and everything and how you helped me, and we can talk about February Evans afterwards, you can. I don't want to put you on the spot, though. So give people some context as to what I mean when I say that. Yeah,
and I got to be honest, Christian. I'm trying to think of, where did we first meet? I think it was at FECon. I'm pretty sure that's perhaps, where we first crossed that. Or maybe it was through Young Voices. That's where I met Young Voices for the first time, was at FECon. But I have developed a habit of I pay very close attention to the people who come into my orbit as I go about my business of life. And I'm very watchful for this because there's a pattern that I have observed over the last couple of decades. And, for some people, maybe this isn't going to resonate. For others, they'll be like, oh, yeah, I get what you're saying. I believe God places people in our lives at precise times and seasons where they hold the key to the next step that I need to take, or perhaps I have something that I can do to help them. But I don't believe in coincidence. And the fascinating thing to me is when you look at how those orbits intersect at exactly the right moment, everything was set in motion long ago, but somehow we came to the right place at the right time, just quickly and precisely. And I think there's purpose behind that. So I look for a chance to learn from anybody who finds themselves in that situation. I want to see, is there something I need to learn from them? Is there something that I can do to help them? And people may think that that's chasing a mystery, and that's okay. I get it. This isn't how everybody thinks, but for me, it has added depth and purpose to my life that I wouldn't want to be without. I mean, to me, it's very reassuring, and that doesn't mean these are people who are going to march in lockstep with me and they're going to agree with everything. And it's just I'm a better person for having rubbed shoulders with them, and I think there's purpose behind it. And I get to work on trying to discover what that purpose is.
Absolutely. And so and hold on. Someone just sent a donation in the chat. Bob Whittlefish, someone who is a very long supporter of mine, very nice person. He said, The Crisis of Democracy on the Governability of Democracies is a 1975 book that was written for the Trilateral Commission. They decided back then to move their control efforts into companies away from governments. Interesting. I'll have to check that out, Bob. I didn't know about that. I don't have much knowledge about that kind of stuff. Do you know anything about that, Bryan?
I don't. Nope.
Yeah, that's interesting. Interesting. Well, so apparently the Trilateral Commission, according to what Bob said, has tried to move their efforts to control information into Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. Now, I don't know much about that theory. I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, I think that there are certain forces at play that do direct the narratives in those companies, most certainly. I think that there are. Sorry.
If nothing else, I know this is where people start to think, you guys are going to get all conspiracy minded here. Let me get my tinfoil hat out. But if you look at the ownership of the most mass media, corporate media in America, and I don't know how far this translates out to the world, but in America, it's astonishing how few big conglomerates actually own the majority of the mass media companies, TV and radio stations, newspapers, and such. There's very limited ownership, which shouldn't be too surprising when you see some of the commonality in reporting, the language, the buzzwords, and the narrative that comes along. And I just want to distinguish, there's journalism and there's narrative. Journalism is the telling of the facts minus emotion, minus judgment. It's just, look, here's what happened, here's who was involved, here's how it happened. You and I have to make up our minds about what does it all mean. Narrative uses emotion-laden words. You'll usually see them in the headlines. In fact, if you see something that kind of generates a little bit of a jolt or fear or anger, that's the time to be on guard, because someone is trying to tell you a story and they're trying to elicit emotion to reinforce this is how you're supposed to think, or this is how you're supposed to feel about it. How's that conspiratorial?
Right. And Bob just mentioned that there are only 5 to 6 major media conglomerates. I didn't know that either. I knew there were few. There were very few. But I'm not surprised. And the question of control does arise naturally in the prudent mind that tries to investigate the origins of the stories within those conglomerates. And I do think, and I don't think this is really a conspiratorial, that's a valid question to ask. Who exactly is pushing these ideas? I mean, Jeff Zucker said during the Trump administration that it's going to be CNN's goal to just constantly cover Trump because it's good for views. Not because he's done anything important or because that, we need to make sure that what he's doing is good and factual. No, just because it's good for views. Let's just attack him and attack him constantly. And these are the kind of motives that make people suspicious of the corporate media. And I've noticed there's a move from the corporate media, from the sort of network news to more podcasting and radio and things of that sort. And have you, over your career, how have you noticed this move manifest? And do you think that podcasting and those other kind of alternative mediums are going to eventually, if they haven't already, supplant the domination that corporate media has over the discourse?
I think so, because corporate media used to be the gatekeepers to, this is the news, this is, for it to get on NBC or CBS nightly news, it had to be a pretty big deal. And, they controlled, here's the narrative, this is what we learned when we turned on the news tonight, this is what they were saying about it. Anything that was going to be published, you had to go past gatekeepers, to determine, is it worth publishing? And nowadays, those gatekeepers, they still exist, but they don't realize the walls of the gates have been taken down. And so with podcasting, with blogging, with all the digital ways that people have of getting their information out there, you can walk right past them. But the trouble is, there's a lot of other information out there, and there is some bad information. It's been hard for me because I've been a terrestrial radio guy since late 1984. I got into radio right out of high school, and loved my years in broadcast radio. But I have to admit, radio is going the same way that newspaper is going, in that, newspaper circulation has been dropping steadily for about 20 years now. If you look at the daily newspapers in most areas, they're thinner and smaller. I mean, you can't even line a decent bird cage, with the daily edition of the newspaper. But there's still independent outlets out there. And as far as, the new frontier, where the audience can be found, podcasting, I think, is that frontier. And I'm sure there are counterparts, on the written word, the publishing side, that likewise are filling that gap. So that's part of what I do with Fed by Ravens Media. That's the second such network that I have helped build and launch. And yes, it's a very independent platform. It's not reliant on Facebook or Twitter. We use those as tools, but it's a standalone app, and we own the app, and we are as independent as we can be, just in case someone says, "Ooh, I don't like that. Let's pull the plug."
Yeah. Now about that. Now I wanted to, this is going to be the last phrase of our conversation. Fed by Ravens. So let me just say before you say anything, Bryan, Pensive Politics is also on Fed by Ravens, guys. It is. In fact, that was actually the first network that it was on. Actually, that's the only network it's on, but still, I like to say it's the first because it meant a lot. It airs every night. I'm not sure when it airs, and I've forgotten a little bit. I'm sure Bryan will tell you more, but it airs. And for a while, it wasn't on because I was transitioning the show to this format right here. But now that I have transitioned it successfully, it's going to continue to be on every night at a particular time. And I am just so happy to be a part of that initiative. I'm so happy to be a part of that project because, people talk about special being censored and it's been free speech and all that kind of stuff, but they don't ever want to fight back in a way that is meaningful. A lot of folks just want to complain. Well, Fed by Ravens is a way to fight back against such encroaches on your listening habit in a way that is meaningful. And, there are people on the network who not all of us agree on the same thing. We all have our own minds, but we are animated by a particular principle. And that principle is the principle of free expression and of critical conversation. Not critical race theory critical, but critical actually in the actual sense of the word. So, Bryan, tell us a little bit about Fed by Ravens and everything about that.
Okay, so the Fed by Ravens Media Network, strictly speaking, is a live app on any smartphone, Android or Apple. It streams audio 24/7, but we also have a very expansive podcast archive. And this is where you can find Christian's show, Pensive Politics, along with a number of others. There is no litmus test that a person has to, you have to be this conservative in order to speak out on this network. Joe Carey, who once was Glenn Beck's chief of staff, he is my partner in this, and we have worked together on a couple of networks like this. And the goal that he had was just simply a place that speaks to the values that are under attack right now by much of the mass media and the popular narrative or the dominant narrative. But we also, every one of the hosts that we have at some level does what they do, not to build a monument to themselves, but because they feel a very personal calling to speak the truth to the best of their ability. And, that's, people ask, what's your unique selling point? Well, that's it. We have people who believe in what they're doing beyond just, this is how I make money. This is how I make a name for myself. I feel like God wants me to say what I need to say. And that's the criteria by which we've said, welcome aboard. Let's get that message out there.
Now, is the network looking to expand with more new shows?
Yes. Yep. We are always keeping an ear to the ground for new talent, and we are adding talent even as we speak. So we just launched. I mean, it's been fairly recently, like within the last 8 months, that we fully launched the network, and so there's some growing pains that come along with that. But we've also seen the numbers and response from people who listen, as well as from sponsors, going in the right direction. And I say that not because it's we're all going to get rich, we're all going to be driving Ferraris. We wouldn't argue if we were able to monetize this in a big way, but the idea is we're trying to help people find their voice and get those voices out there. This is a platform from which people can speak freely without constraint and without having to be run through a number of filters. In my opinion, what we need are many, many more networks like this. The more competition, the better, because it will make us better, and it will also make everybody else work harder, and the best, will rise to the top. That's the blessing of competition.
Indeed. And so, will February, and this is my own personal question, will February Ravens ever expand over to video, or will it always be the streaming thing on the app?
We are going to expand to video. We're in the process of doing that right now. I wish I knew more about it at this moment, because I don't have my green screen up yet. I just got my studio moved and set up, so I'm still in kind of a rudimentary setup here. But yeah, video is going to be a big part of it, because video is a powerful medium for telling your story, for speaking the truth. You've seen that. I think you've proven that with Pensive Politics. And so yes, we are going to be adding that component to other shows as well.
Bryan, where can folks find February Ravens, and where can folks hear your show? Because you do a show as well called the Bryan Hyde Show, which I listen to as much as possible. And if I could just give my endorsement, it is one of the, if not the best, and it's not sucking up political shows on the air right now. I thoroughly enjoy it. It is so refreshing. I have never once heard Bryan dunk on someone or just attack someone. He always engages with ideas, and he does so with content that is not antagonistic, but it sparks a sense of inquisitiveness in my mind, at least. So where can folks find the network, and where can folks find your show at?
Thank you. First of all, you're very, very kind. And now that I know that you're listening, I'm going to start putting some effort into my show, because I've kind of been phoning. It's easy to find online. If you want to go to the website, it's fedbyravensmedia.com. Hang on a second. Now I got to make sure I'm yes, fedbyravensmedia.com. I'm sorry, I had to double check that. Or better still, you can just go to the App Store or the Google Store and find Fed by Ravens. It's a free app. Download it to your smartphone, and you can see for yourself. There's a nice list of the personalities, the shows, the podcast, as well as a live stream that you can access, and that's free of charge.
Wow, amazing. Well, Bryan, I have plenty of more questions for you, but I also know that we have time is coming is a little bit of a thing right now. So I want to end the show at a reasonable point. Do you have anything else to say to me or the audience before we go?
I'm just really grateful to be a guest on your show. I've watched with a little sense of pride as I've watched you climb and grow and develop this and continue to develop it into something that's very viable. You're making an amazing splash. I mean, at 21 years old, I was working in radio, but I was looking to be the next Casey Kasem. And I think I specifically said the words, I would never work in talk radio. And then I turned around and had to eat those words with both hands years later and realized, actually, this is kind of fun. And I like being able to talk about issues that matter. And then I had to mature and talk about issues that matter in a way that didn't make people feel like I was, trying to club them into agreement.
Before we go, who's Casey Kasem? I don't know who that is.
Casey Kasem, American Top 40, back before Ryan Seacrest, back before Shadow Stevens. We're talking 50 years ago. It was,
Oh,
I'm Casey Kasem. This is American Top 40. By the way, Casey Kasem was the voice of Shaggy on Scooby-Doo.
oh, okay. Oh, wow.
Voight
Okay.
Scooby, very recognizable voice, but he had the, indisputably most listened to radio program for top 40 music of
Oh,
anybody in the
God.
country for years and years and years.
Oh my gosh, Bob always does this. $99. You always do this, Bob. I don't know how to handle it, dude. Thank you, Bryan, for finding and helping this excellent young man. Bryan, Bob, you always do this, man. Thank you. I appreciate it, but thank you, Bryan. When people give me donations, I don't know how to handle it. At one point, when Bob gave his first donation a few months back, I think I almost cried.
That's acceptable. Look, I look at it this way. I like you. I ask my listeners, if I'm providing value to you, I would encourage you, help me to focus on what I'm doing right now, which is finding and curating and disseminating the best truth that I can find. And my promise to them, and I'm because of what I know about you, Christian, I'm sure this would resonate with you. I treat that as a sacred trust. That's a stewardship. It's not, woo, free money, I'm going to go party with it. It's a matter of this is going to be used to help keep the show growing and to keep the message going. And like you, it's appropriate to be very thankful for it. You want to shed a tear? I'm not going to judge you one bit for it.
Well, it's a humbling experience because I would have never imagined that I would have been able to actually gain money from this kind of thing. And when you first begin to do that, I think that at least if this is your passion, this is your dream, and this is what's in your values, what you want to do with your life, the dream becomes manifest quickly. And it's no longer a distant prospect. It's an experiment still. It's a work in progress. But it's just awesome. It's just awesome. So Bryan, thank you so much for being here. Stay around for a little bit. I want to talk to you after the show ends. Everyone else, thank you so much for being here as well. Please join the Discord if you guys would like to. The Discord is a community where we can all talk and get together and have fun, and you have access to me 24/7. I love all of you, and please stay pensive. Bye, guys.